You don't know, you better ask somebody. You listening to the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and summer is officially over on the podcast. Winter is just around the corner, so it's time to start talking about it. And this week is an all-time snowboard episode. I have a guest whose story has never really been told. Mike Ranquet is a Northwest skate kid who met Craig Kelly on a chairlift at 14 and was part of that original Mount Baker hardcore crew. Mike was the original asshole snowboarder who always kept it real. And being that this is his first real interview, it's safe to say that keeping it real has hurt his career over time. While we only saw Mike Ranquet in paid ads and videos for the most part, he was one of those dudes that was able to bring skate, snow, and music together, especially in the Northwest. Ranquet goes all over the place in this podcast, so there's a ton of history that comes out, but I'm not sure if he ever really answered any of my questions, and it really doesn't matter. Before we get into the show, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, share my Facebook posts, which no one ever does, and if you have anything that you want to share with me, you can email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com. Finally, I need to thank my sponsors. They are Evo, Rescue Water, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk to Mike Ranquet.
I wrecked the girlfriend's car last week. You know, she's a teacher, needs her transportation, and everything's kind of working out now. For a couple days there, it was gnarly. If this was like a week ago, there'd be no podcast today. You know?
You were all right with the accident?
Oh, yeah. I just rear-ended someone. I didn't have a choice. Traffic in the lanes, and I didn't get hurt or anything. And, you know, she just drove off the lot with a new Subaru yesterday. First new car she's ever bought. So things kind of happen for a reason sometimes. It's right in line with my life. You know, that's built into my DNA where I get rewarded for fucking things up. I really thought it was over those days, and apparently it just kind of refreshed itself.
And you're in Hawaii right now, right?
Yeah.
How long have you been over there?
I've been here a fucking decade now.
Damn.
Yeah.
Do you make it back over here at all?
I haven't been in the mainland in 6 years. No, I'm just kidding. I come back. Like, I rode Baker a couple times this year. Saw my sister in L.A. Me and my chick went to Morocco a year ago. Yeah, we get off the rock.
Is it all about kite surfing there for you now?
It is, dude. It kind of sucks to fucking admit that. But I swear to God, like, I feel like in my head, it's the same exact thing I dealt with saying that I snowboarded in the 80s to my skater friends.
I can see that. I mean, I look at it as it's almost in the board sports realm.
Almost. That's a big almost.
It's almost looked at as the rollerblading of board sports.
Oh, yeah. No. And I know that. And it's really funny because I can kind of fool myself and be like, no, I think people see me do it now and they think it's cool too, you know? Wrong. And then the other one is like, no one in kite surfing thinks that. They fucking seriously think they're the cat's pajamas and the prettiest girl at the prom, and, you know, haven't realized that they're chubby and fucking their dress is a little bit too small and their mascara is smearing. And it's a really funny paradox to fucking kind of watch from afar, but really close, because the whole sport started here. I didn't know that going into it, but like it was literally invented on the beach that I ride every day, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, and you look at footage from just 20 years ago, like the late 90s, you know, you say the late 90s in kiting, that's like saying, yeah, I snowboarded in 68 when I got back from Nam, you know? It's like a fucking long time ago, and like the footage from then looks like Keystone Cops or something. You know, you look at snowboard footage in the 90s, and it's like, okay, yeah, I can see that, you know? You know, snowboarding had its Jester hat phase, I call it, up to about 89, probably, from about 86. Where it's just like, I can wear a Jester hat and a three-piece suit and go snowboarding. I'm crazy. I'm pretty, you know, that type of thing. And then the skater element came in and was like, fuck, that's dorky, you know. And with kiting, they've been in that Jester hat phase with no check from another board sport, dude, 2 decades now. 2 decades they're fucking running on Jester hats, you know? Like any girl that just walks down to the beach and puts a kite in the air is pro. Just like the late 80s and early 90s snowboarding. Everyone was pro. You go on like Facebook, you know, the history of snowboarding shit. It's like everyone was like, I was so special. I snowboarded in the 90s, man.
I called it the rollerblading of board sports, and I want you to know I like rollerblading, so I have to put that out there.
I like that defense. No, I have no problem with that because I love Terrier's line. He's like, because somebody said that up at Baker. He's like, dude, that's like the rollerblading, blah, blah, blah. And Terrier's like, dude, unless it's super pipe or AK, snowboarding is the rollerblading of board sports. And just hearing him say that, I was like, yeah, that's so fucking rad.
And it holds a lot of weight coming from that dude's mouth.
Yeah, like I could say it in a test for half of it, half that thing, but he can say it in a test for all of it. It's pretty fucking gnarly.
Well, I think the big difference, too, is he had a lot of global exposure where I feel like you should have had a lot more, but you were more regional, and it was maybe because of your attitude.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, it was a fine line. I didn't have the 8 cover shots over the years. I didn't have the Transworld interview, and I knew that a long time ago. I was like, okay. I always looked at it like the band that didn't get played on the radio, but still sold tons of records.
Yeah, totally, man.
In that sense, I was the total Seattleite, just being Seattle's proudest son at that point in my life. Yeah, so it was kind of funny, but it's definitely fucking crazy now. I've got a good friend, Lion Farrell, over here. He's 20, maybe 21. He just missed the Olympic team by 1, blah, blah, blah. But, I've just watched his career from really close and then afar, Sometimes we won't talk for 6 months or whatever. And it's a trip seeing him go through getting dropped by his sponsors after the Olympics. And in my head, I'm like, dude, you can't be surprised. You know what I mean? Like, he was a shoo-in with Red Bull because they have a lot of affiliations in Maui. So, I think he just thought, Red Bull was going to sponsor him for a long time. And they did. They sponsored him forever. But, that was his way into contests and travel and stuff,
Yeah.
I told him forever. I'm like, dude, get a board sponsor. Even if you got to pay them, ride for Rome, ride for someone. So when the fucking little bubble pops, you got one foot in the industry,
Yeah, and you have authenticity with the board sponsor. You're never really going to make the big bucks with them, but that cements you, I feel like, in the industry as a pro. And then when you get the Red Bulls and other people, that allows you to travel and have some money.
Yeah. It's just like, it's kind of turned skating like that. Skateboarders don't make much on board sales, except one dude every couple of years gets some blowout board, like the Muska shit, But for the most part, it's funny how it turned into that, whereas it used to be boards paid. You know what I mean? The board company paid you a lot of money.
In the magazine days.
Yeah, the magazine days.
Before we even get into any of that, for you, everything starts in Renton, Washington, right? Like 1970?
Fucking Renton, dude. Yeah.
It sounds like it was full-on suburbia growing up. I think your dad was a lawyer, and you lived in a manufacturing city that's built around Boeing, and I think that's changed a whole lot over the past 30 years.
Yeah, totally. I was there on the cusp of that, in that it's like, do I claim North Renton or South Bellevue? And I was like way more North Renton, and then it got ghetto, say 10 years after I left. Renton I still got a couple friends, really good friends that they'll still hashtag Renton strong and shit on stuff. You know what I mean? Just fucking around. But I got some dudes that hung tough in Renton over the years. It's pretty funny. But Bellevue was not me, either. So it was I was just on that border.
And was life pretty easy for you growing up? I mean, having a lawyer dad, I would think there'd be a little bit of coin.
Believe it or not, my dad was just that good guy lawyer that had his clients for 30 years and got into tax law later because they were all starting to die and have wills. And he was independent. He wasn't with a firm. He was just on his own, which I didn't really understand when I was younger, but that's kind of punk to not go with a big company and to be a strong attorney, But he was rad. He put himself through school. He grew up in Great Falls, Montana. My dad was 50 when he had me. He was born in 1919. So it's he passed away about 8 years ago. But his life went from, seeing horse and buggy shit to trying to understand Wi-Fi.
Dude, that is crazy that he was 50 when he had you.
Yeah.
Is that how you kind of, when I ask people about you, a couple words come out. Asshole and awesome always come out in the same sentence.
Rad.
everybody says that. And I think maybe if your dad's a lot older, it's got to be a lot looser, especially when you're in like your teen years and your dad's 80.
Okay, so a couple things happened in my teen years. One thing was my dad was always active. He woke up at 4:30 in the morning. He never drove a car. I don't think ever. He never drank alcohol, never smoked a cigarette. He woke up and went on a 7-mile run when I was younger. And then when I was in my late teens, he was still running 3-4 miles, when he was 67, almost 70. So he was like always active. And yeah, so there was a big disconnect in that I could say, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm going to go to Judas Priest in a couple weeks. They'd be like, oh, okay, whatever. My friends' parents would freak, like, you can't go to that concert for whatever reason. But my mom was just like, yeah, whatever. And then my sister passed, so when I was like 16, and that kind of like, looking back now, it just really pulled an e-brake on the family,
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy.
And basically, I've talked to my sister about it. She's like, you just took off when I was 15. I figured out over time, it's like the known to me was not known anymore. Like, it was scary. The known to me was dead, and it was like real crazy shit. And so like traveling and going into the unknown and not knowing how situations were going to turn out didn't seem that scary to me. I don't know if that makes sense.
It seems like it takes a lot of your innocence or kid-like nature away if you lose a sibling at a young age.
Yeah. But the raddest part, the craziest part is like enter Craig Kelly. That's right when I met him. Like, he knew my sister that had passed. I knew him long enough that, he knew her. And then about a year after we started hanging out is when she died. And he just became this surrogate big brother, uncle, dad, more of a bitch than anything. You know what I mean? Like, and, when he passed, my mom would tell me that, every weekend when he'd call me and say, hey, do you want to go up to Baker? Go ask your mom, see if it's okay. He'd already called my mom. He was just like that. And I think he saw me and Kelly Joe, they both saw me as I saw me at the time. Like, if I don't get some good guidance, I'm going to go off some rails. If I just stayed in Renton, never met Craig, and didn't really skate, I'd be a completely different person because I wouldn't have a way to channel all that kind of gnarly shit.
You'd be fucked up or in jail?
Yeah, pretty much. And maybe I'd, be in school, maybe I'd be a mechanic. I don't fucking know, but like, I went to travel the world and met all sorts of rad fucking, I can go all the way back in my life to, the point I met Craig at Ski Acres. It's like from that moment on, everything changed.
Before you met him, were you a skier?
Yeah, like I was skiing my whole life. So from like 5, we go up with the ski school on weekends. And I was a pretty rowdy skier. I wasn't like, say, racing material, but I was better than most. And then I was going to be a ski instructor for kids so I could get a free pass at Hyack. But that was the deal. If you, instructed 3 nights a week, you got a free pass or whatever. Probably only worked a day a week. But I was training, I guess, to do that. And that was like in October of, I don't know, 84 or something. Me and my sister were doing it. But that same fall, I was like skateboarding in empty pools in Seattle with gnarly guys like Pat Cork and fucking dudes with mohawks, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I went up to the ski area, which, Hyack, it's barely a ski area. It's almost totalist. So it's not like some fancy resort, but it was very regimented. This is how you learn to teach people to ski. You have to learn to ski again, and blah, blah, blah. And just all this hours and technique of like inside edge and how much prep. And it just drove me nuts, and I couldn't fucking do it. And because during the week I was skating, you do whatever you want. You run from the cops, and, it's gnarly. You can fall and get hurt.
Skateboarding was your whole life at that point. I mean, skiing you have too, but like skateboarding was your shit.
Yeah. Skiing I did from a young age, but like the first time I rolled down the street on a skateboard with a real skateboard, I remember looking down just going, okay, this is what I'm doing the rest of my life. I don't know how, I don't know what that means, but this is what I'm doing. It just felt so comfortable. And then just the rebel part of it was insane, the punk part of it. And it just kind of like made this little storm.
Through skateboard media, is that where you see your first exposure to snowboarding?
Yeah. It was in a Thrasher. Yeah, Thrasher. I think it was a quarter page. I saw it a couple months ago because I have a bunch of my old skate mags. Yeah, I think it was Jake Burton in that, or Heingartner, one of the two.
And I heard that your first time going snowboarding, you end up on a chair with Craig Kelly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Your first day?
Yeah, like me and my friend Gil, he lives up in Bellingham, has a family, and total nerd. No, he definitely was. But, like I was a rocker kid, and he was Adam Ant or something. Whatever shitty music he listened to then. So that was like the first kind of friendship I had with someone through skateboarding that I definitely wouldn't have normally been friends with just through the normal social ways you get to know people.
You met Craig on your first day on the mountain on a snowboard. You met him on a chair. Another person I heard you met in your lifetime, and this is more skateboarding than anything, but I heard you went on a trip to Del Mar and you met Hosoi at some point and you ended up getting boards through him.
Yeah, like it was 84. So like I always like to put in perspective of by the time I went to the 86 Worlds in Breckenridge, I think everyone else there except like Tom Sims and probably Palmer and Kidwell, the whole halfpipe event was really successful and cool. You know what I mean? Like I had seen Hosoi do 10-foot airs out of an 8-foot bowl with such fucking finesse and style. You know what I mean? Like those guys were so fucking good back then. And then to go snowboarding and like pretend to like enjoy what I was doing, it just seemed like a joke. I was like, this is bad. I wasn't back in the pipe riding back then, because we're not skateboarding. But like hadn't really found its own yet either. That happened kind of years later where for me anyways, snowboarding got defined finally, and that was my first days in Alaska. But that's another fucking whatever. By the time I was at the Worlds in 86, I had been skateboarding in California twice, basically and seeing with my own eyes like the best skateboarders in the world and skating pretty gnarly terrain. You know what I mean? And it was like a total black sheep of society thing. And then, you go snowboarding and it's like, it was like Slayer versus like Skid Row or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like snowboarding was like this happy metal and skateboarding was this like fucking angry Slayer fucking Metallica metal. And so it was like hard for me to even take it seriously at first. I was like, fuck. In a way, I remember kind of thinking sometimes, because I wanted to be a pro skater, which I never was. But, thinking of that, I was like, what am I doing in this fucking sport? This is ridiculous, People that, don't even know what a backside air is. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck am I doing? I should be skating. By the time I was like 16 or 17, I'd done both enough and saw the trajectory of snowboarding. And was like, fuck, if I just put my eggs in this basket, then I can just enjoy skateboarding and I don't have to compete on the West Coast thing and try to be this fucking like D-rate pro that got 16th at a contest one time. So it's like skateboarding for me was all of a sudden like, say from my 88 on, I was kind of like getting better than most of my friends because I didn't have any pressure. I wasn't like, oh, I got to learn this trick this summer. But in snowboarding, it was more like, I had pressure, I guess.
And in snowboarding, you're like the young one, though, because with your crew, like when you're riding with Craig and Dano and Fulton.
Oh, yeah. Those guys are old as fuck.
Yeah, well, you're 14 and they're like 17, 18, 19.
Yeah.
And they're taking you to the mountain every weekend. And is it initiation? You're the little kid, but you're doing what they're doing. If they're partying, you're partying, and you kind of grow up pretty quick?
Yeah, and like, God, what's that American artist? Rockwell, It was almost like Rockwell of board sports. It was perfect. Fulton was older than all of us, but Fulton and I connected because he skated. I met him already at skate contests, and then Craig BMX'd, and then Dan was a surfer. Yeah, it was a trip looking back. It's like all these little pieces were there.
It's the first generation of Mount Baker hardcore, and it's Mount Baker before it's the legendary Mount Baker. I mean, this is all the beginning, and where snowboarders look at Baker as the pinnacle of snowboarding in terms of mountains. Back then, it was just Baker, and you guys were creating that history.
We know how gnarly it was, really. It'd be like growing up on the North Shore of Oahu surfing and then start to travel in the 70s and be like, what? Santa Barbara? This is all you got? You know what I mean? Like, the first time we were at Breckenridge, we were camping and we woke up looking at Peak 7, I want to say. I don't even know anymore. But we thought the lifts were access lifts across the flat sections. We'd never seen anything so flat. Like, we were like, no, those got to be access lifts for forest fires in the summer or something. That's not a ski area. There's no fucking way. It was like laughable. And then everybody was like, hey, where are you crazy guys from? We're like, Mount Baker, come on up. And then people started coming up. And then I remember seeing Palmer and Kidwell wanting to hike out of, I think it was Dolphy's. But this is back when, like, no one did Dolphy's. It was, like, Sunday night, and there's one track in. It just looked gnarly. When I saw those guys considering hiking out, I was like, huh, this place is pretty gnarly. Like, it kind of put it in perspective, because Tahoe doesn't have that. It's like, Tahoe is like, it snows a bunch, but then it's just sunny for days afterwards. And, everyone's in T-shirts again.
Yeah.
It's not mountain.
Difference there and here, though, is here you grow up in these elements and you expect it to be shitty, and shitty isn't shitty. It's a good day if it's all gray and
Yeah. I love that shit. Yeah.
But there they do get their storm cycles for sure. But then, like you said, the sun comes out, and the sun never comes out here.
At Baker, like if I go from Hawaii to Baker for 2 weeks and it snows every day, the only day I'll take off is the sunny day. If there's a sunny day in the middle there, I'll just take that whole day off. I'm like, whoo, killer. I can just kick it, man. Those are just my tracks from yesterday. That's how I've always been, so I go other places. And it's just, I tripped out. Like, everything, it was like happy snowboarding. Everyone's in just spring. And I like gnarly snowboarding, I like getting scared.
Well, hey, at this point, I've got to take a break real quick to talk about my sponsors. My first sponsor is Evo, and if you haven't shopped at evo.com or been to one of their stores in Denver, Seattle, or Portland, you are missing out on the best retail and online experience in the country. The stores themselves are created to be a gathering place, an art gallery, a movie venue, and a travel base with the goal of making your adventures more fun. On the web front, Evo offers a low price guarantee, free shipping on orders over $50, and a no-hassle return policy for everything ski, snowboard, bike, skate, lifestyle, and outerwear. On top of that, for listening to the show, they're going to give you an additional 10% off your entire order. When you check out, use the code capital TPM, the number 10, all one word, and you will get that 10% off your order. My next sponsor is Rescue Water, and they are proactive recovery. What does that mean? Think of it like this. When you need a pick-me-up, you drink a soda or a cup of coffee. But when you really need energy, you grab yourself an energy drink. Well, with Rescue Water, it's a similar principle. When you need to hydrate, like when you finish a workout, get done practice, or get off the mountain or trail, skip your sports drink and drink a cold Rescue Water. There's no better choice for replacing electrolytes, and it's a difference that you can feel. I like to drink a cold Rescue Water before bed after big nights out, and it's a lifesaver. Make Rescue Water work for you by heading over to rescuewater.com and save 20% on a 12-pack case by entering the code RESQ WATERTPM. That's all one word, and you can find that over at rescuewater.com. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They are all about drinking beer outside and supporting snow sports and culture. And this year, they are doing something that no beer has ever done before. They're not only creating Pray for Snow parties in their pubs that are going to be like no other, they've also produced their own ski and snowboard film, Pray for Snow, featuring riders like Ben Ferguson, Eric Jackson, and Lucas Walks. The world premiere is September 29th in Portland, Oregon, and it is going to be a party. For a full tour schedule and more information on the beers and the pubs, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors, so we'll get right back into it. And one thing I noticed, or I think one thing everyone noticed, is your style when you were riding. I mean, there was one thing about you that was different than everyone else. It's kind of like your arm was always in a different position than everyone else's. And I think you broke your arm as a kid, had it in a cast for like a year, and it was kind of fucked up. What happened, and did that totally affect you?
It was like the Varney vertical air show in Big Bear. I used to call it the Barney vertical hair show. But anyway, so I went down to that, and I was hanging out with like Damien and Dana, like had some strange bedfellows in snowboarding. Like I got along with pretty much everyone. And then all of a sudden I was kind of like the little kid that was, Craig's little buddy or something growing up, but like kind of doing this new thing. It's like they weren't doing it, but everyone else kind of learning to snowboard was, and that is like ride like a skater. You can see it in 87 issue of Transworld. 88, I think I got this 2-page spread in the red and black North Face, just doing the nose bump. And that picture is an anomaly in that issue, On the cover is like, a racer and 2-page spreads of fucking the ginger Dave Alden. Just crazy shit. Like, what? But, you go a year and a half later and everyone in the magazine kind of looks way more like me. And there's no more of the kind of fluff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was a trip at the time because it was like, I explained it to some kite friends the other day. We were doing this whole interview and he was like, what's your point? Kind of, because I rail these guys. And I was like, here's the bottom line. I go, this is how I looked at snowboarding back in the 80s. I can't bring my friends to come do this. It's got to be cool enough that when my friends go look at it, they're not like, oh my God, that's a joke. I was like, I guess I take it on as my duty to try to make things a little cooler. So basically I can just show my friends without being embarrassed of what I do.
I'm going to go back to about 86 because you mentioned the Worlds at Breck, and that was a huge trip for you. I think you're still in high school. You're not even old enough to drive, but you asked your mom to take her van.
Oh, I did. Craig Cully did. Craig was such a Eddie Haskell with my mom. She loved him. And like, I think his transmission in his Subaru had just gone out. I was the youngest. They weren't using the bus that much anymore. And my mom just like kind of lobbed it out there because it was like, fuck, we can't go. It was like, that dumb movie from the 80s. Like, what's that ski movie?
Hot Dog?
Yeah, Hot Dog. I mean, it's like that. It's like, oh shit, the car broke down. Ah, shucks, we can't go now. you know what I mean? And like, there go the careers of Craig Kelly and blah, blah, blah. And, my mom just kind of stepped in and I think she offered it to Craig even because she knew we were just in this pickle and she really liked Craig. She kind of saw snowboarding for what it was, but also I think she saw it as a growing sport and something that could get big. And basically, Craig was, without saying, just a surrogate fucking family member for me, And I think anything to help him be a good influence on me that they could do, including giving them the family car,
Yeah.
She did.
I heard you totally painted it up with logos and did something like a 15-year-old kid would do.
Yeah, and it was something 19-year-old kids do, too. We put stuff like Black Sabbath. Like, I remember I put a big black, started to put, like, Black Flag, and I went black, and I did the 4 bars, and then I just finished it with Sabbath. And it just looked sick.
Is that your first big snowboard trip, that 86 Worlds?
I think so. I think I went to Tahoe with Dan once or twice, in Marcella. I think was on one of those trips. Yeah, for sure. And I'd done some trips to Hood in the summer with Craig. Going down camping, right near the fucking big lodge in there. So that was pretty much the first trip for any of us, really. I mean, any snowboarder, anywhere, really. You know what I mean? That 86 Worlds, like, nobody really traveled before that, right?
Yeah.
That was such a fucking funny scene.
That's what lets Craig and the whole crew know that there's a big future ahead. I mean, especially for him. People already know who he is, but that really puts him on the map.
Yeah, but at the same time, Craig, I think he had his 2 credits shy of his chemical engineering degree at UW. He wasn't like myself or Fulton dependent on this new form of fucking going down a hill. Craig could have walked at any time and finished school and had a good whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just stepped into a good job. He was really smart. And then, just seeing that smart part of him that was like the racer guy in him kind of like turn into this kind of like pseudo hippie over the years was kind of funny. It was cool to see. Not funny like, fuck, what an idiot. Like, cool. Like, oh man, he finally relaxed. I was going to say about my arm, too, a minute ago. I broke it at Big Bear, and I was hanging out with Dana and Damien, and I broke it all the way across my wrist, so every bone. And so I wouldn't twist my arm. They put it all the way up to my fucking armpit pretty much for the first, I think, 9 months.
Oh, geez.
And then cut it down a little bit. It's better than surgery, I guess, because, I would have gotten surgeries had that been now, right?
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, you've cracked your fib. You need 6 screws,
Yeah, it's a totally different kind of medicine, but that helps build your style a little bit, just being locked in that cast.
Yeah, and like even with front set airs, skateboarding, it stalled me from doing good ones for a while because I couldn't straighten my arm out, my left arm.
Yeah.
So when I went up skating or snowboarding, really, and wanted to do like, be Chris Miller and fucking, bone the fuck out of it to the point that my arm is straight, on a nose bone or something. I couldn't really do that. So with skating, I learned I'd pop into, like, say, a 4-foot fronted air and just bash my nose out super hard right away. And it would slide my hand all the way down the board, and I'd kind of grip it under the, like at the wheel. Like it was almost a Tindy sometimes, my fronted airs, because I couldn't straighten it out. So I'd bone it out and everything, but I just let my hand slide down the board. It was funny little quirky little things like that you figure out, Learned to juggle really good with my right hand. Unfortunately, I got caught masturbating. The second time I fucking jacked off, I got caught by Craig, I think.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it was awesome. It really fucked me up for a while. Had the stranger going,
The stranger where you sit on your hand until it goes numb?
Yeah. So, yeah, Craig caught me jerking off when if it was 2 years later, I would have been like, what? I'm jerking off. But, like, I was so young. I was like, oh, my God. Like, it was so funny looking back. Yeah, he caught me jerking off, and that fucked me up for a while.
Yeah, it's so funny that when you're in high school and you get caught doing something like that, it's super embarrassing. Later on, though, people talk about it like it's no big deal. And speaking of high school for you, what kind of kid are you in high school? Because you're hanging with all these older dudes, and you're kind of a fuck authority dude just by your whole life.
None of that really appeared till after, I think, 7th grade. Yeah, I was 12. It was like I just got into fucking punk music and skateboarding, and like skateboarding just opened up this whole fucking like crazy world, like I was going on the bus to Seattle every weekend to meet other kids that lived all over the city, and then we're just gonna skate. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it was pretty rad, but it wasn't like attractive because it was off the beaten path. I just felt so comfortable on a board, and I hated walking. That's not why I got into skating, but I do still to this day. I hate hiking. If you ever catch me hiking, I've lost it, Yeah, just because my hips. I had fucked up hips growing up. I was born with dislocated hips, and then I broke one when I was like, I think 2. And that's when they discovered they were dislocated, too. So, like, I fell down some stairs or some shit and broke a hip, and I had to be in a cast for like my entire left leg and 3/4 of my right leg for a year.
Wow.
When I was like a toddler learning to walk. Like my first memory is with this cast on,
That's crazy. And I'm guessing you're like the ADD all over the place kid too, which must be tough being in a cast, but you don't remember that much.
It's weird. It's like I was a smart ass, but not on the world class level that I turned into a couple, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
by the time I was 16, I was like pro smart ass, You couldn't have seen that coming when I was like, 8, 9.
Were you getting in trouble being a smartass and getting kicked out of class?
A little bit, but like I wasn't that big of a smartass then, and like I just didn't have felt like all through school I didn't know which way everything was headed. I didn't know where all these people were going or where I was going, and I wasn't buying it. You know what I mean? I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then the music, I first got into like just rock, and then as it were, you get into punk, and then you drop all your rock shit for like a year. You pretend you never listened to it.
Right.
But then by the time I was like 15, I was back both sides of my music shit. But like just the music alone even sets you aside in school. Like I was super into Zeppelin, and then I was super into Dead Kennedys. I didn't like Floyd. I didn't like Hendrix at the time. Love him now. But like I was really, no, Zeppelin because blah, 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 blah. Like I had reasons for it. It's funny because out here, I haven't talked snowboard shit for a while. Like I think the last time was when this kid from Burton was out here that G had me basically get some weed for. But he was a super cool kid, but like it was the same thing. I hadn't talked snowboard shit in a while. I got a lot of stories in that shit.
Yeah, and as we kind of move into your career a little bit, you graduate high school.
No, I didn't. And then I think right after the 86 Worlds, I got my GED. My sister had just died a couple months prior. Got my GED. I went to some big snowboard contest, and I had a couple sponsors. Like I went there, like Mike and Pete gave me a GNU, and I went there on that.
Is this Team Disco?
Yeah, and it was even before that. It was just a black base. It was before their roundtails or anything.
Okay.
So they gave me like basically one of their stock boards, but on the trip, Tom Sims comes up and asked me to be on the Sims team. And that was like fucking over the top. I didn't care to what degree, but I just knew he was a skateboarder.
Yeah.
He was the shit. He wasn't like Jake, who I respect the fuck out of, Jake Burton. But, I looked at him differently back then. If he walked up to me and said, I want you to be on the Burton team, I would have probably thought about it, but I probably wouldn't have done it. Craig wasn't on the team yet. You know what I mean? Like, Tom Sims was the shit. Yeah, you didn't even think twice about that fat mustache of his. You just ran with it. You're like, yeah, he looks like Tom Selleck, I guess. Like, looking back, it's funny shit, dude.
And it's both of the things that you're passionate about. He does them both. So it's like the real rider owned back then.
Yeah.
They were cool.
And then, there's that big Burton Sim shit back then. And it was really funny to me because I just see it as a classic. Tom's like a West Coast guy, East Coast kid that moved to the West Coast, took acid, wanted to change the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Started the snowwork company and just kind of like, he did it exactly how I would have done it if I was him at that point. With his background. Whereas Jake comes in, he's like, oh yeah, my wife's family owns the fucking Celtics. There's some old East Coast kind of bravado money getting sunk into Burton at the time that nobody really knew about it, but he was setting up a real business, like Fortune 500, like it had to be scrutinized by investors, whereas Tom was like, what, you give me 50 grand? Yeah, you can be third owner, sure. Brad Dorfman, whatever, and Tom was stoked. Tom was more about a lifestyle. I think just Jake saw the writing on the wall, like this could be bigger than skiing.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of saw that or thought that, but I think Jake was a real visionary back then too, I wasn't, say, quote unquote, his biggest fan back then. Like what he did with Craig, how he turned his whole company around on that one dude.
Yeah.
Basically, that was genius. And he knew if he didn't get Craig Kelly, Kidwell couldn't go to resorts and talk to managers the way Craig could. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have a personality to sell the brand and sell the sport.
And you have to be smart, educated. And Craig spoke well. You know what I mean? He could go talk shop. Oh, yeah, I was a UW, Beta Phi, whatever. You know what I mean? Just that whole side of it. Craig was this perfect fucking vessel.
He wasn't some scumbag snowboarder.
Yeah, not like us. And it's funny, like looking back, because it really was engineered, but it also all fell into place. But Craig happened to be an engineer, so he knew what he was doing, but it was also really organic. It was a trip.
At this time, there's snowboard companies like the Sims and the Burtons, but then, around the 87, 88, ski companies are getting into snowboarding too because there's a lot of money to be made. They see the potential as well. And is that where you start getting pissed off at skiing, or are you pissed off before that?
Oh, I wasn't safe. Yeah, I was probably pissed off. Skiers to me were like these people. Like, okay, at the time I remember I was looking at a golf magazine, and I didn't golf then. I had a couple-year patch of golfing years ago, but whatever. I didn't golf then, and I just remember looking at it and just going, fuck, it's the same companies that advertise in this magazine as in ski magazines. It's the same shit. It's like there's nothing about, like, look at the way this guy skis. Like, Phil Mayer skis so fucking rad. He just, digs trenches and blah, blah, blah. No, they just talked about, like, just the physics of it all. It was just a technique, you know?
Yep.
So it's like, you know, you swing the club like this, put your shoulders like this. And skiing, they were just killing any kind of free skiing. The idea that skiers, like, this is where it gets funny to me. Because I always think of, where would skiing be if snowboarding never happened? Like, that's the funniest thing to think about. You're talking about, like, a sport that couldn't figure out how to rotate over a 360 until we came along.
Yep.
And even at that, you know, when I was younger, like, if a dude did a helicopter up at Alpental when I was skiing, it was like you went out to the window to check him out.
For sure.
It was like a big deal. Cut to 10 years later, and everyone can do a 360 with ease. Skiing couldn't even see its own potential. They couldn't even see past their poles. And there's so many examples of it, like going up to Alaska the first time and just seeing these guys sink on their skis. And me and Craig just ripping these fucking lines in front of, like, Doug Coombs, in front of Scott Schmidt, like heavy skiers that we totally respected and were fucking absolutely, like, honored just to be in the fucking heli with.
Right.
And we fucking tore new assholes on them. And it wasn't said, but, like, it was a joke, you know? And because, you know, Craig would do a shoot and say 8 turns. They'd do like 40 or 50 turns.
Right.
And then I'd do it in like 6. And these are mountaineers that, you know, Scott Schmidt, he was gnarly, you know?
Yeah.
I don't even have to go into it. And to me, he was like the North Face. He was so cool. He surfed in the summer. He had a Volkswagen van. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he's the raddest dude out there in skiing.
Yeah, so it was like, to be up there and seeing them realize that their equipment doesn't allow them to do what they ought to be doing. You know what I mean? Like, they should be able to float on powder, you know? So it's like skiing without snowboarding I love that I kind of play with that in my head sometimes, like how ridiculous it would have gotten.
Yeah, how narrow would their skis be today if snowboarding didn't come about?
Yeah, and like, say, you think they wouldn't have had, like, ballet in the Olympics by now? They would have had couples ski ballet in the Olympics, you know? That's where it was headed. That's what they were doing when we came along and saved the day, you know?
Snowboarding changed everything, and then the Olympics came around a lot later. I was going to ask you about this later. But what are your thoughts about the sport that you come up with, which you're an outcast for the first 10 years of your existence in the sport, and people look at you like a second-class citizen?
Which I was.
You might have embodied that more than anybody in terms of, like, the punk snowboarder person. But eventually, respect comes along from the mainstream because of something called the Olympics, which is totally foreign to the snowboard world. Tara J is not all about it. How do you feel about it?
You know, say, like myself, I grew up with the healthy respect of the Olympics, you know what I mean? I fucking watched them with my mom when they were at Lake Placid and Calgary, and so it's not like I was like, fuck the Olympics, but it's funny just how it kind of grew in, and some people just wanted to clamor. Like, say, you know, what's interesting is I interviewed Ted Martin. You know, hearing him coming into snowboarding, he just wanted to get to the Olympics, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, it's just funny how at the time I was tripping on it, like, that guy is really fucking cool, you know? Really funny, and how we both, from completely, you know, different areas, shaped the sport, you know? And when we collided, you know what I mean? Like, say, he helped shape the video writer in that when I got kicked off the World Cup tour and kicked out of Japan, that was supposed to end my career. I was supposed to go home and really never be heard of again, except for some Northwest Series contests, you know?
Yep.
But on the way home, you know, like, what do you do on a flight home from Japan when you're 19? You just got kicked out of the country.
Yeah, you get shit-faced.
Yeah, you get shit-faced, but you're just like, me and Roach were just like, fuck, what are we going to do, you know? Because we both just got like 3rd and 4th at the last contest. The night before we got kicked out, we were like, dude, we can win this one. You know, let's fucking, you know, all drunk, looking at each other, bro hugging. Got to the next morning, and we were fucking out of there. And so it's like, what do you do now? And so, like, I was on the plane. I was like, I just started thinking, what do skaters do? Because there are a lot of skaters that don't fucking compete. You know, they're all these street skaters, because that was kind of a new thing then. And so I just started thinking about that and just going, why wouldn't, say, Santa Cruz pay me the same amount of money, whatever it was, $1,000 a month or something, and, use the same amount of money to fly me around places to actually ride and film that, then kids will rewind it instead of like miss it when it's on at 2 a.m, whenever they put snowboard contests on. That was the only coverage. I just started thinking about that. I was like, think of all the money being spent like on the OP Pro and like, some ex-pro fucking gymnastics guy was the MC. They spent money on that, but nobody ever saw it. And so like I just kind of put that in perspective and said, Artie and Jerry are going to, I think, Tahoe, then they're going to France. And there's one other trip they're doing for the year. And I was like, I just want to be on all of them. Why don't I just go fucking film? And my friend Joel Gomez from Sessions, like he ran the Santa Cruz team back then. But this is something I understood, but Chris didn't. Santa Cruz Snowboards was licensed by some Swiss dudes.
Okay.
So it had no connection to fucking like Santa Cruz, NHS, independent trucks, fucking Jason Jesse. You know what I mean? The shit that we loved Santa Cruz for and thought we represented. I kind of realized on that flight home that it's not even that company, Yeah,
you just license the logos and can make boards.
Yeah, because they didn't want to do it. They licensed it out to these Swiss dudes. And so that's why all the first boards were race boards and really Euro heavy. And their team, the second we were out of there, it was like, they had a pretty all-star cast of Euro fucking pipe jocks, But Roach stayed on. Roach was like so on. Like, I remember telling him, like, dude, that's not Santa Cruz. That's like you ride for Switzerland or whatever. That's not like Jason Jesse Santa Cruz. That's like fucking way out there, and they'll never listen to you. Even if you get a pro model, they'll never promote it. They'll never send you anywhere. If they don't like you, you got kicked out of Japan.
And that kicked out of Japan, there's a famous Santa Cruz ad, I think it's a black and white ad that Joel shot.
Yeah.
It was like, you won't find these guys at Japan Worlds because, and what did you guys actually do to get kicked out?
Anywhere else in the world at that time, if somebody just came up, if one of our parents or even parents' friends had seen us in that lobby in Japan, any of those nights, and just said, Michael, what the fuck are you doing? If any employee would have came out and said, hey guys, stop. This is loud. You guys are being obnoxious. We'd be like, oh, okay. No one ever said that. So like, it just kind of went. And, it got to a point where on the water slides at that hotel, Craig was standing up, just peeing on people as they went under him. Like there's this funny shit going on. Just stupid teenage mayhem.
Yeah.
But like, we were just getting away with it. Nobody was saying anything. And it was so fun. And then that beer but the one thing was like, every time an incident happened in the hotel, they'd ask who did it, and they'd just say, oh, the guy with the green hair and the guy with the blue hair. Like, we were the only ones that they could explain. So looking back at that and being to Japan, like, 50 plus times after that, and that was my first trip, it's pretty funny because now I know how the Japanese are. For example, we, in the Four Seasons of Tokyo one year, we took all these trees from the lobby and just stuffed the elevators with them. This is like a really famous Four Seasons, really nice. We were staying there, and we stuffed every tree in the lobby in these 4 fucking glass elevators that went, all the way up. And I woke up at 10, just super hungover, just like, oh, fuck, go, where's everybody? Walk down the fucking hallway and hit the elevator, and I go to get in, and it's all trees. They didn't even take them out, They just kind of let things go for a while until they get really bad, I think.
Yeah, because they're a polite culture that doesn't want to rock the boat even though you're rocking it, and then they just get you out of there when they can.
That was a funny fucking thing, and, like, on the way home, I just kind of created this dude that wanted to fucking just go out and film. Craig thought it was pretty ridiculous that I would propose that, and Santa Cruz wasn't really going for it at that point. It was like coming to the end of the winter, but they paid for some trips, and basically they would drop me in the summer, and then Burt Lamar fucking calls me up, and I'm like, no fucking way. There's no way I'll ride for Burt Lamar. He was like, no way. There's just no way I was going to ride for Burt Lamar. That was just ridiculous. Fucking, I'd never hear the end of it from Craig, from Palmer, from everybody that hated him, which was everyone. And then basically he was like, well, what are you going to do? He's like, I kind of heard that, you wanted to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, exactly. And he basically gave me $5,000 a month when I was 19 or 20.
No shit, man. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, totally. And I was like, yeah, I'll entertain this, but no way I'm going to ride for Burt Lamar. That's ridiculous. And then, went down there, and even at that point, I was like, no way. Because, like, Craig hated Burt. Craig got, like, dethroned, one year from the World Championships by Burt, which is really funny, Craig didn't consider him a snowboarder. He just came in and swooped in, and he knew how to compete, It was like Craig despised Burt Lamar. That was, like, the toughest call, having to call Craig and, like, tell him, riding for Burt. But that was, like, the coolest shit ever, because Burt was smart, and he saw that it's not going to go this way. Because a good example of another sport that was on a cusp at the same time in a different direction is windsurfing.
Yep.
Windsurfing didn't take the board sports route. They were like, oh, we're cool, we're unique. Well, where are they now? Whereas snowboarding is kind of like tucked in the safety net of board sport,
Yeah, it's like windsurfing went the country club route and snowboarding didn't.
Yeah, it's a trip, because the same dudes that wanted snowboarding to be a discipline of skiing, basically, and be in the Olympics and blah, the racers, the Europeans, they were all windsurfers also in the summer. And so here I am, 30 some plus years later, dealing with the same fucking group. Right?
Yeah.
Like, for real. Like, it's like round 2, I feel like. It's insane.
Back to Lamar. You had that Ranquet Heineken board, which had to be one of the best sellers for that brand ever.
Yeah.
And it had a unique shape as well. And did he give you a little bit of freedom to fuck with the product?
I had 100%. Like, if I wanted that to be a 132 with the downturn nose, it would have been a 132 with the downturn nose. Yeah, I could have done anything. And my number one thing in my head was, I want a board that I can walk into any shop anywhere, pick one up off the wall, and go ride. I had been riding custom equipment for a while, like Tom made boards for me, or Mike and Pete boards, and so it's like, if I broke one of those boards, you can't just get another one. You can't order another one.
Right.
And I'd always look at Craig, and he had like just so many fucking Burtons, but like, he was narrowing in, basically making his board, and so I copied one of his earlier shapes.
Okay.
And then I copied part of that, and then I copied part of the Santa Cruz board I was riding, that weird nose one. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
The ones that had the plastic or the rubber inserts?
Yeah, they were the ones before the rubber inserts. In fact, Chris and I had 2 normal nosed ones. We didn't have the cutout.
Okay.
The tallow, that's what it was. The tallow had that cool shape part where the wide points of the board were off the snow. So the nose floated in powder, and it didn't exactly have a taper because it was a twin tip, but it basically sank in powder. That's all I wanted. I wanted to be able to walk into any shop, pick up one of my pro models, and ride it in powder. Because like some boards that I was riding up to those years, when I would ride a board and then not be able to ride it at Baker on a powder day, it was like, it's pointless. Like, I couldn't ride for Burt or anyone for $5,000 even if I couldn't just go ride Baker. And so, like, I guess my board, like, number one thing was like that it floated in powder and was stiff and not a noodle. And freestyle aspects of it were kind of like extra. I was pretty powder dominant even then, even freestyle days. Like, I always had like my upbringing at Baker in my back pocket, like, whereas dudes from other places didn't have that. They were just kind of like snowboarders. We're, going down the cat tracks. Whereas I was like, fuck, there's a whole nother level of the game out there.
Well, in your pro career, it was like the Mount Baker hardcore days. Then you're competing and doing a lot of pipe and riding well in that. And then it kind of turned into flat ground, it seemed like you invented the butter.
Well, that's all skating. That's just all street skating, right? Like, at the time, I mean, if you go back to skating, it was like when little manual boxes were getting big, and people might have a small hubba. They could just, pop up and just do nose slide across stuff, or manual backside 180 out, and just all that kind of stuff was going on. And yeah, so it just made sense to me. And say when I go to Alaska years later, some people at that point didn't even know that I could ride like Big Mountain or that I grew up a baker. They just saw me as this like, I guess, freestyle kid or whatever, this kind of punk, They didn't really understand my background until, we were out of the heli and I could ride up there. I wasn't scared.
Well, I think with your time with Lamar, there was a big skate influence. I mean, did Cardiel join because of you, or did you help recruit him to Lamar?
Yeah, I completely recruited him because I was like, if I'm on a team with this guy, then we're the best team in snowboarding. I always wanted to be surrounded by really good riders on a team. I didn't want to have to carry the brand, but I ended up carrying a lot of brands over time. But like all I really wanted to be was like on a team with, say, like Rayberg and whoever I liked at that time.
The first collab Lamar had with Alien Workshop, was that part of you as well?
That was me 100% because Mike Carter, he did Alien Workshop. He broke off from GNS, so I knew him through GNS. He was a skate team manager at GNS Skateboards when I was on GNS Snowboards.
And that gives Lamar instant credibility in the skateboard world, too, just because of the riders on the program and the collab they're doing.
Dude, like, yeah. And again, my number one thing was I want this sport to hold up to the scrutiny of my friends when I take them to do it. And they were all skaters. So it's like, it really made sense to me because maybe I saw it more than other people, but I knew there was a big divide between skiing and skateboarding and that one of them wouldn't live through the 90s.
This is around the time of Roadkill, which is, I think, Dave Sione's first movie with Fall Line Films. And
yeah,
that's one that's a huge one that everyone should see. You can probably find it online, but the lineup of riders is incredible. And it's game-changing in the way that it shows lifestyle and who you guys really are compared to maybe what was available before that movie.
Well, it was all like kind of like ski movie style before. It was like Warren Miller-ish, like Critical Condition with Jerry narrating it. It was a break from that.
It was a much more representative video of the lifestyle that you were leading than any kind of narrated video could be.
Yeah.
We talked about some sponsorship stuff with a lot of the brands that you were on, and we're not going to talk about everything, but one thing you're known for is burning some bridges with sponsors, and usually it seemed like the bridges were burnt while you were still standing on them.
Yeah. A lot of times.
Was it just you were all about your moral compass and what you thought was right in snowboarding?
Kind of, yeah. Like I was like this big moral compass. I felt like if no one's going to be the gatekeeper, I guess I will be. There's no Jake Phelps in snowboarding. There's Pat Bridges, but if you look at a photo of Jake Phelps at 14 years old, you're going to see this crazy guy with glasses. He looks crazy. He's a gnarly skater back then. He's the same thing now. Like Pat Bridges was like, he was kind of a racer guy and then just kind of grew into this like California West Coast. And that's cool. I like Pat, but I'm just saying.
He's Yoda.
He just has a different background. And say when he was 20, 21 years old, he was racing and doing stuff like that. When I was 20, 21, I was riding deep fucking powder. And that's the only thing I wanted to ride. And so it's like the cool guy of our sport, so to speak, I guess. Like skateboarding, you can't fuck with Jake Phelps. He's just gnarly. He's gnarlier than you. You can go back 30 years and look at a photo of him. You're like, yep, he was gnarly. That's just not the same. And Pat's not trying to be that, but I don't know. Snowboarding's a trip, man. It's weird like that in that. I remember like after Roadkill, like seeing some dudes ride and going, oh, those guys must skate. It was like Rayberg and those guys. When I first met them, I thought Rayberg totally skated just by the way he snowboarded. And it kind of like fucked with my head in a way when I realized that those guys don't really skate. A little bit, you know what I mean? Like Rowan skates a little bit, fucking Nate Cole skated a little bit, but they weren't like, say, me and Roach, or me and Noah.
Yeah.
So it was like all of a sudden it was the first of like dudes that look like they skate, but they don't. That was always kind of weird to me, but that's our sport.
It's always changing.
Yeah.
If you look at it, there's been a lot of eras since you started. And I mean, there was the neon era in the beginning. Then like in the mid 90s, it seemed like a lot of money was coming in, but it was still about all the love and everything. Then there starts to become the gangster brands.
See, that's where the snowboarders just take it too far. It's like that whole gangster era or the big pants thing. Like everybody in the world stopped wearing big pants, including skateboarders, except snowboarders for like a decade. They still wore them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you were embarrassed about or what era, but I think you just said it right there.
Well, yeah, it's funny. Like if you go back, even my goofy outfits, at least they were Gore-Tex.
Right. They were functional.
Yeah, totally. I can say that. Like, oh yeah, that green jacket is ridiculous, but it was a 2-layer Gore-Tex North Face. So fuck you, you know. And I wore that so I could stay out longer.
I was an East Coast kid growing up, and where I was, we didn't hear about you at all. I mean, you could see you in videos here and there, but I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but was your moral compass and you keeping it as real as possible all the time? Is that why you never did like a major interview where people could read about you? Because I read about everybody, a lot of people lesser snowboarders than yourself, because all there was print back then, but there was never anything about you in print.
It was pretty ironic getting a Legend Award from Transworld in that when they were putting together a reel to have when I went up on stage or whatever, they were calling me. They're like, hey, when was your interview? When was this? I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot you guys snowboarders and shit and you don't know your own history, even in a magazine. You guys never did a fucking interview with me. You never printed photos of me. The only shots I ever had in Transworld were fucking paid for ads because early on I voiced my opinion at the guys at Transworld. They put goofy people on the covers. It was like just stupid cover shot. And it was like 1990. And Craig was like kicking me under the table. We were like having lunch with, I forgot who it was exactly. I know Lee Crane was there. And I just fucking popped off on their magazine, how lame it was. I was like, it's ridiculous. I was like, look at the fucking cover. What is this? Like, this isn't a sport. I just really called them out, and they fucking took that one to heart and didn't print a photo of me for fucking, 25 years probably.
So then they give you the Legend Award.
Yeah, then they give me the Legend Award. I just thought that was really funny. And none of the people working there now fucking worked there before. So many hands had passed.
Sure.
So it wasn't like that, but if I was going to give an award to some dude, I'd make sure my magazine had backed him at one point or something. Or, like if they do the Legend Award in skateboarding, that skater gets like a 2 to 10 page interview. And I remember I kind of said that to them because at the time we'd been going on D-Day and I was like, fucking let's do an interview. And yeah, it just never happened. Just got blown off. It was just kind of weird. I was like, wow, that's funny. It's almost as if something's gone through the years of that magazine. Like everybody that's about to quit is like, okay, we're out of here. The only thing I can tell you is don't print Ranquet, okay? Whatever, Like, and then, yeah, it was just kind of funny because it meant well. And I like those guys. But if you look at the skateboarding ones, it's like more respectful.
What's sad is that this interview here will probably be the deepest one that's probably out there on you, and you're a legend in the sport for so long.
I think it's cool. I know we've been running on for a while too, but I'm a funny guy. I got some funny shit to say and some relevant things and not so relevant. And yeah, I was part of that sport for a long time.
So money-wise, it sounds like you're making $60,000 a year from Lamar, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And then you've got other sponsors as well. I heard you bought a house in West Seattle, which is probably the best town in the country. And I heard that house is absolutely batshit crazy inside.
It wasn't totally batshit crazy. But, I ran with, at the time, hung out with Eddie a lot, it was the first time in my life I'd ever really hung out with people, gone to dinner and stuff like that weren't skaters, that weren't surfers or snowboarders. So it was like getting to know like artistic side of Seattle, all these band people, And so, yeah, so I fucking set up a bunch of amps and just shit. I don't know. It's just like a big playhouse for people I knew then. And yeah, West Seattle was like, it was still West Seattle. It was just kind of white trashy.
Still like the white center kind of bleeding into West
Yeah,
Seattle?
white center. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Yeah, it's just funny.
I've had a lot of people on this show that brought you up. I mean, I had Amen on, J-Mo, Bobby Whitaker, all random people that all brought you up and talked about the nature ramp and stories there. So where is this ramp, and is that where the whole scene was happening, or is it at your house?
It was 2 miles from my parents' house. It was in the Renton proper side of what is now, I want to say Newport Hills. Yeah, it was 2 miles inside of Renton. So my parents had like 5 acres that they bought for like $2,500 or something in the 70s. And then that summer of 86, when my sister had passed, the other existing ramps in Seattle had just got torn down. Like Granny's was about to get torn down, this other ramp. And I remember just being stressed. Like, I'm not going to have anywhere to skate anymore. There were mini ramps, but once you kind of get a taste for vert, mini ramps are cool in between. You got to have like a vert setup, you know?
Right.
So I think my mom offered me like $3 or $4 to build the ramp and do it proper. And so it did, you know, I was like 16 and built 10-foot trannies, 2 feet of vert, 28 wide.
That's sick.
It was insane. Like, that's a proper ramp. I never wanted to outgrow it.
I mean, 2 feet of vert, man.
Yeah. Like, the only other ramp in the country like that was Texas Shut Up and Skate that I had skated the prior fall. I went down there on some trip, and I think it's from snowboarding. I just love the big transition, you know?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, 8-foot trannies just seemed tiny to me. I was like, fuck, man, they need to be bigger.
So at the ramp, is that where you're meeting all? Because, I mean, it sounds like you're totally connected to the music scene here, too. When, like, the quote-unquote grunge scene blows up, you're not playing music, or you might be playing music, I don't know, but you are totally involved with all the bands, it seems like, or at least the big ones.
Yeah, it's like, it just kind of fell into play. You know, one day we were about to resheet the ramp. I think we were doing a couple repairs. You know, I was talking to my friends. Yeah, it's going to take a couple weeks. Probably going to be about $6 or $7 this year, and we're going to see if I could get somebody to kick in and blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, an hour later, I get a call. This dude, fucking Eddie Vedder, he's in this local band, and they wanted to film a Rock the Vote thing. So I was kind of like following along. He's like, well, we were going to do a free concert in Seattle with this setup ramp that these guys from California were going to come up and build, but we had to cancel the concert. And that was this huge Pearl Jam show. And that's when I started to put it together. I was like, oh shit, this is a singer of that fucking band, you know?
Yeah.
And so he was like, well, you know, we still have that date to film. And I'd been on a couple of like commercial sets at that point. So I knew what that was like. He was kind of like, we have all these dudes coming here with a bunch of cameras. We still want to film something, basically, was what he said. And so he's like, do you have a half pipe that we could use? We want to paint it and then do what you're going to do on it, you know, basically. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, you know, basically what was the cost? And I said, about $6 or $7 And then he met me, I don't know, 40 minutes later up at my ramp in Renton with like $9 cash, probably $8 cash, and just gave me that. And I was like, whoa, this is for real. You know, basically grabbed my buddy Mike Seaman and a couple dudes and went down to Renton to the fucking lumber yard and started getting shit delivered. And yeah, so they filmed this Rock the Vote thing, but the rest of the band wasn't there the whole week. But Eddie just kind of liked the vibe out there. Like, all the dudes from California that were going to come up and build this ramp in the park, it was basically the Volcom crew doing their first trip ever as a brand. Yeah, they drove up to Seattle. It just happened. It was fucking wild. Then being there in the transition of Pearl Jam, going from, you know, maybe lending Eddie $40 for some groceries one night to a couple months later where he'll never not have a 7-figure account again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was like a cool transition to kind of see those guys on. Then even like, say, Bob Whitaker, who's fucking awesome. Like, he and I, like, back then, we didn't get along. It was like 2 alpha males enter a room, and everyone would be like, oh, Mike, you gotta meet Bobby. Fucking, you know Bobby? And we'd kind of look at each other across the room and nod at each other, you know, at best. But then, like, years later, finally all that shit came down, and I love that dude. But yeah, it's just funny, like, we were both Seattleites. We both grew up in Seattle, and I think that he didn't think I did. Whereas, you know, most of the people at that time moving to Seattle or in bands that weren't famous already, they're all moving from California, from here, you know. You had a distrust of anyone new at that time, you know?
Right.
It was just funny, like, say, year 2000 is, we end up being really good friends and just laughing about all that shit. 2 alpha males in the room, and both of them are Seattle's proudest son. Yeah, it was fucking funny, but that guy's awesome.
Your snowboard career, we're talking around 2000, maybe a little later. It's starting to wind down. And how does pro snowboarding end for you?
Pretty much not being able to walk, for some years. I was riding good, say not up to par, but like I had already kind of realized like I don't have to play catch up. I'm Ranquet. I can just kind of do my own thing. But then my hips started really fucking with me and I couldn't physically snowboard. So like, I started judging contests. I was working at Electric. I worked for Electric for a couple of years, Seattle, then moved down to California.
Were you a founder of Electric?
Yeah.
So it was like you, Peter Line, and maybe, I don't know if Eric Crane was involved then or not.
Wasn't even Peter Line. It was myself, Kit, Bruce Beach, and Eric. Eric didn't work there per se at the time, but yeah, he had a lot to do with the imaging, the branding of the brand.
And then you moved down to California to take like a desk job there.
Yeah, which was just a fucking joke. It's like Encino Man goes to high school, Like, I just had a different life than most, and all of a sudden here I was. I wanted to put my time in and wanted to kind of develop a cool job over the years. And so I wasn't afraid of sitting down at a desk for a couple of years and doing that. And snowboarding, it just got weird at that point. It's like when the punk rockers, took the big rock bands out in 77. It was like this young generation, but like in music, the punk rockers and the rockers were like in the same bands and shit within a couple of years, and they're all cool with each other. Whereas like snowboarding, it was like if you were from a certain era, it was like fuck you.
Young kids coming in.
And I got that, as I used to say back then, like just watching the road to snowboarding's past being replaced with the bridge to Utah.
Right.
Utah blew up so hard, though.
You're talking the Forum 8 generation?
Yeah, totally. But that just really happened in succession, where it's like, there's a big DC house out there. The Olympics are there. So the whole sport just fell into the lap of the, say, third generation pros. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And yeah, it was a weird one. Just seeing other sports and understanding what I did for the sport, but also starting to understand that I may never really get proper credit for most of the things I did. That's the one thing I really liked about the Legend Award, which I can't appreciate more, that they put me in that light. It's like I didn't get that for winning contests or starting the biggest brand. I got that because my underground influence,
Yeah, but your underground influence was only underground because the magazines decided not to cover who was making major transitions within the sport. You happened to be one of those guys who had an attitude and an opinion, and sometimes people don't like people with an opinion. I feel like that's what happened.
Oh, yeah, totally. And yeah, it's funny, it's just like, I'm still me, and had a lot of flack for an opinion I had about some things with the use of Craig's image in the last couple of, say, 10 years. I mean, I never got so much shit about anything about somebody of which none of these other people even fucking knew.
Right.
That was crazy, to me. I was like, what the fuck? What are you guys defending? I'm just saying, as an old friend, this is how I see it. I think that company has been opportunistic and very liberal with their use of his image and their brand.
There was that use of the image, and there was an issue there. But then if you look at Burton and how they've portrayed his legacy, I think you're more on the same page with what they've done.
Well, yeah, because I look at it like this. Burton, they had a pretty long-standing relationship with Craig.
Yep.
And I see that as very respectful, like Craig's prototype shit. That's fucking rad. I'm not sitting here praising Burton, but like at the same time, they've downplayed that too. They put out, say, a Craig Kelly kind of reissue, but they made like 10 of them. Like, I can't even get one if I wanted one.
Right.
It's not like they're just fucking selling like hotcakes. It's more like they're doing a good job of keeping his spirit alive, in their brand a little bit, and it should be. But like the other thing, it was different. I know too much about that now to even want to defend my points, which I could to no end with now what I know. And it's like, I just had an opinion and all of a sudden people were involved. It was crazy. The one person, Brian Kelly, he called me that morning. He was like in tears laughing, just going, dude, I can't believe you. You fucker. That's insane. Basically, that's what the family's been talking about for years. You know, that's the elephant in the room that nobody really talks about. And you just fucking did that? Like,
Well, you're not the dude to keep the elephant in the room quiet.
well, yeah, you know, it's just like one too many photos that morning, or one too many hashtags of Craig's my co-pilot, or, you know, whatever. Earlier that winter, though, when I saw like one of the snowboard movies had it on the cover. That's fucking rad. If Snowboarder was on the cover, they'd put their fucking tram on the cover, right? Because it's the one, it represents snowboard.
Right.
If they're paying $50,000 for some coverage in this snowboard movie, they want to represent their mountain and their brand. And it's like, when I saw Baldface on the cover with Craig's Cross, I was like, okay, that's where, to me, it just kind of crossed the line in that they're paying for that. You know, they know damn well that that is the image of their brand at this point, you know, the Craig's Cross. I know Craig just wouldn't never let it go down like that.
Yeah, and I think that's all that needs to be said is you knew him well.
Yeah, he wouldn't have signed off on that. He was really selective. You know, he might be involved with something. He's not just going to, in a will, hand him, you know, here's my legacy. I have nothing against those guys. I don't even know if they were aware of how far it went, but I think it went too far.
I do have a couple more things to talk about, and then my final segment in the show is called Inappropriate Questions. So first, let's just see. I think when you sell electric or when it gets sold, I think Volcom might be the first brand to buy it, but I'm not 100%. But do you get paid?
God, can I legally talk about this?
If you have to say that, then let's not talk about it. So we won't talk about that. How is your lifestyle right now? Comfortable?
Oh, that's funny. No, I work pretty hard right now.
Do you have to work like a job?
Yeah.
What do you do?
All sorts of shit. I manage an ice plant, as I call it. Oh, we made ice, you know?
Yeah.
We live on a hot island. We make ice. It's one of those innocuous things. And been doing that and just other shit. You move out to Maui and then you just kind of go, okay. You end up doing a lot of things you wouldn't do in the mainland.
So you deal ice.
I deal ice. I manufacture and deal ice.
Well, I hear that's very lucrative and you get your customers coming back and back because it's in Hawaii and they always need ice.
Yeah.
And then you start D-Day Snowboards with Roach back in, like 2014. What happens with that brand?
In a sense, I could go off on some shit on that. And at the end of the day, it was just a bad business idea. It just didn't work. We had somebody that was just rotten to the core that was involved with the business, the brand, and everything. And when I called him, this person on that, and kind of gave them a chance to come back in the fold, be like, okay, you're rotten, you're this. From here, we got to be square, you know? I just wanted everything illegal. That's all I wanted.
Yeah.
If I was 22 years old, I probably would have just ran with it. Oh, fuck it, you know? But I was like, no. And going through electric, say, working there the 7 years before they sold to Volcom, you got to account for every penny. You don't get investors' money and not have receipts for it, for example.
Yeah, there's budgets and there's accountability.
Yeah, or invoices or anything. And I just pulled out. It was just a shitty deal. You know, when you believe in something you don't understand, it can get pretty tough. And I didn't understand Nico's really, he was a weird guy, you know, so I just kind of called him out and I was like, I'm done. I've been out here in Hawaii for 8 years. It's not like this is something I've been building for years, you know?
Yeah.
I wanted to be involved. It would have been fucking cool if we could have pulled that off. But yeah, there's just someone in the middle of it that made that impossible. Yeah, that's all right. I got out and rode for a couple of years and got to meet Deadlung and ride with him a bunch. And yeah, he's one of my best friends now. So that's rad. I'll take that, you know.
That's the end of D-Day, and really, we've been going for a long time, so I'm going to call it the end of the interview, but when I call it that, I have one segment of the show that I call Inappropriate Questions, and I get someone that you know to ask you 3 inappropriate questions. And from the Legend Award that you won, you still have a little issue with skiers when you were giving your speech. You spoke a little bit about them. But I decided to get a skier to ask you questions, and it's probably one of the only skiers you like. His name's Glenn Plake.
Oh, sick.
I'm going to go with number 1 right here from Glenn.
Just finished a month on set in Georgia for season 2 of Truck Night in America.
Nice. So it worked.
It was awesome. They ordered a second season, so we just filmed another 12 shows. And now we're holding tight for editing and what have you to take place. And rumors are that they're going to order a third season, and the next time around they're going to order 20 shows. But you never know. It's New York, and you can never trust them. But as far as I know, I think everything is going good. It's been an interesting journey, so to speak.
Well, I did see on social media, I want to say it was probably like 6 months ago, and I'm a terrible person because I don't reach out to anybody when I see anything, which is just how I operate. But you were on a plane and something happened?
I was on a plane when I realized there was something wrong. I had a little weird fall, and I had done a red eye from Europe. All of a sudden, I got a little food poisoning, and the next thing I know, I was trying to make a flat light day work. I kind of skied off of a 10-foot Widowmaker in some flat light and just kind of, just didn't feel right afterwards, and never went away. Stinger little thing, stretching, this, that, made it through that month. All right, kind of keep going. Made it through a bunch of guides exams, this, that, and the other. And finally in April, I said, okay, I need to take 4 days off. I'm going to stretch. I'm going to go to massage. I can't live with this little tingle all the time. Shoot, by the end of the week, I wasn't able to walk. I had some sort of weird equilibrium that it was working. And then by not staying on it, let's say it kind of did its own thing. Come to find out I had a ruptured, protruded, bulging, whatever you want to call it, disc. So they went in there and clipped this thing out, and now I feel fine. But it was brutal. Absolutely the most painful thing I've ever gone through in my life. And yeah, it was on the plane when I kind of noticed it. It just couldn't make it go away, and just So I did that. Like I said, I did like double red eyes with a little bit of a crash, and whether it was falling asleep on the plane or sitting that way or whatever, it just didn't work, and it wasn't going back in. So they had to go in and take it out.
And it worked first time? Because with backs, they're kind of tricky, but you sound like you're good.
Yeah, so I never had back problems. My legs were asleep. It was all nerve. I had no back pain whatsoever, and that's when I called Dr. Stone, the team doctor, and he said, "You don't have any back pain?" I said, "No, it's my legs are asleep. I can't move my legs. I can't use the bathroom. There's something going on. What the hell's happening?" He was like, "Yep, we'll operate on Tuesday," without even looking at me. I'm like, okay. So we hauled butt to San Francisco, and they went in and did a little microsurgery, and I'm fine. Absolutely fine.
Well, that's awesome to hear. Well, we're here to talk about Mike Ranquet, and I know
Exactly.
You have a history with him, and I think you went on a Rip Curl tour with him.
Couple of things.
And you're probably the only skier he likes, or there might have been a
Cool.
handful back then. That's just my guess, and I was wondering if you had question number 1 ready for Mike Ranquet.
Yes. So, question number 1. What do you do to your handler/interpreter in Argentina after a week or so of being bothered, or he's been bothering you? And you can also say, feel free to name the accomplice is...
Yeah, I was going to say, that's so funny, dude.
So you've got an answer for Glenn's question.
Yeah, I love his use of how he turned that all on me, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, the accomplices." Okay, so yeah, this pretty boy. Everyone back then in Argentina, all dudes from Buenos Aires, looked like Jim Morrison. They all had long hair, and this guy worked for Rip Curl. He was the interpreter, but would never wake us up to get on the early lift because he was always fucking hungover. I was hungover every day, but this guy, he'd go out to 4 a.m., 5 a.m. He'd roll in when we're waiting for him to wake us up or take us to the ski patrol shack or whatever. So yeah, the last morning we fucking gave him a homok, just shaved a stripe right down the middle of his head.
Oh, no way.
He woke up fucking freaking. Glenn filmed it, and we didn't understand why he was freaking so bad. It was because he had a huge fucking scar on his head from getting some surgery when he was a child that really kind of fucked with him, and all of a sudden that scar was exposed. It was awful actually, but it was Glenn's idea, and he did have it coming. Yeah, something had to happen for sure.
You pretty much brought that guy's childhood scars back, and they probably tormented him until his hair grew back. Now we'll go with question number 2.
Okay.
Mike Ranquet, you are a badass snowboarder. Are you as good as Sean Palmer?
Unless there's a bib with a number on it involved, I'll smoke him on any mountain. But once he goes into race Palmer and puts a helmet on, fuck, I don't even want to be on the same chairlift. So, yeah, it'd be a hard one to judge. But, yeah, I'm better than Palmer.
Okay, and here we go with Glenn's final question.
Did the war / I hate skiers start on the East Coast, or was it just, in fact, a Burton advertising campaign? Does that make sense? I was like, did the war I hate skiers, was it an East Coast thing, and was it started by Burton?
Was it a marketing tool of division before there was a whole society of division?
Yes. And is Burton the Antichrist?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that was invented as Burton's marketing employ because they basically hate themselves because most of them came from skiing, whereas most of the West Coast came from a board sports culture or not skiing, though.
So it started over here on the West.
Yeah, I think so. In the East, until we started making half pipes, they just wanted to do races. They wanted everything timed. Like a ski race.
Yep.
They didn't want to deal with fucking judges and shit like that.
Gotcha. Well, I want to thank you for your time, man. Your career has changed a lot of people in snowboarding, and unfortunately, the whole world didn't get to know about it because unless you had Roadkill or a couple other videos, you wouldn't have seen Mike Ranquet in the magazines because he was an asshole who pissed off the magazines, but he was an asshole who was true to everything that he believed in.
Yeah, I just had some kind of made-up moral high ground, and I ran with it.
So that was time with Mike Ranquet, and he's one of those dudes, just like John Cardiel, that I really didn't think I'd ever get in touch with and actually make an interview happen. And I was totally wrong with both. They were both super easy to get in touch with, and for Mike Ranquet, that's not the end of him on the podcast. After the show, he mentioned that he's a funny guy and he's got a lot of great stories to tell, and he wants to share some more. So I suggested that we do 10-minute stories on all my snowboard episodes where I play the moderator and let Ranquet run telling stories from his past. So while you didn't really hear from Ranquet when people really cared, you're going to hear from him now, and I'm sure with Ranquet, nothing and no one is off limits. So another legendary story told. Now it's time for me to ask you to help me out by subscribing to my newsletter on my website. This is where I'll announce future guests, announce giveaways, and who knows what else. I'll never send you more than one update a week or any random crap. It will all just be pure, unadulterated PAL movement info. I also want to ask you to give me a review on whatever platform you listen to me on, especially if you're a regular listener. It really helps the show grow and it's appreciated. If you're on an iPhone, it takes a minute and here's what you need to do. Go to podcasts on your iPhone or iTunes, search for the PAL movement, scroll down to where you see the stars, hit 5 stars, and you're done. I thank you so much for doing it and for listening. Finally, I really want to thank my sponsors who make this show possible. They are Evo, Rescue Water, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.